All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Sean Carroll. I am a resource educator for Cornell Cooperative Extension, Dutchess County. I'm here with two of my colleagues tonight who I'll introduce in just a minute, but just want to welcome you to the program tonight entitled Tools and Partnerships for Local Invasive Species Management. We'll try to keep tonight as close to an hour and a half as possible, but we got a lot to cover, and we got Joyce Tomaselli with us here, who is an absolute expert on this stuff. So should have a really good program for you all tonight. Just to let you all know, what we're going to try to do is, if we have small, short questions that can be answered, feel free to interrupt either Joyce or myself as we're presenting. But we will have dedicated 10 or 15 minutes for questions at the end as well. So feel free to use the Q&A or the chat box function in Zoom here. And we have our colleague, Michelle Gluck, who will be helping to moderate that as we go along. So feel free to use both those functions. So just a little bit about Cornell Cooperative Extension. So CCEDC is a subordinate governmental agency associated with Cornell University and its land grant mission since 1869, providing research-based resources, tools, and education for the residents and officials of Dutchess County. So Michelle and myself work for our Environment and Energy Program, and Joyce is part of our Agriculture and Horticultural Program. But we also have two other program areas, our Family and Consumer Education Program and our 4-H and Youth Development Program. If you want any more information on CCEDC, feel free to reach out to any of the three of us or visit our website at ccedutchess.org. And one last thing I wanted to mention is tonight's program is being funded by Dutchess County. So thank you very much to them for that. So tonight's presenters, as I mentioned, Joyce Tomaselli. Joyce is a community horticulture resource educator here at CCEDC. She'll be giving a great overview on some partnerships in the Hudson Valley region associated with invasive species management, and she'll be talking about some specific ongoing research and specific invasives of interest. And then I'll wrap up the evening giving an overview of iMapInvasives, which is a great tool, which I'm hoping some of you have had some experience with, but if not, we'll have a great overview of that tonight. And then we'll have some time for questions after that as well. I just wanted to mention, we do always appreciate if you guys can fill out a survey. We have a survey, and we'll send the link out in the chat box here toward the evening, and we'll pass it around in an email to you all as well. Again, really appreciate if you've been to any of our programs, we really rely on these evaluations for future programs. They're really helpful. So if you can take 2 or 3 minutes to fill that out at the end of the evening, we really appreciate it. So with that, let's get it started, and I'll kick it off and pass it on over to Joyce. And let me stop sharing.
And the clocks all just rang, so now I don't need to worry about the clocks ringing. I told Sean they were running 2 minutes late, so thank you. So the topics tonight are tools and partnerships, and we're doing the partnerships first, and Sean will do the tools in the second portion. What I'm going to talk about here is an entity called the Lower Hudson Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. I'm going to give you an overview of it and put it in the context of our involvement with it and what I see our opportunities for other entities or organizations or municipalities, how they could benefit from passive use of the resources or active use as a partner. And I'm going to give you a couple of projects that have been important from our point of view, from an educational point of view, over the last couple of years to kind of reinforce some of the points. And then I hope I won't go too quickly, but I'm going to try and take 3 90-minute workshops and put them into about 15 or 10 minutes to talk about a couple of species of special concern and the project that we're doing this year with Lower Hudson PRISM. So the PRISMs have been around for quite some time. They were a lot more centralized until maybe around 2012, 13. And now they're a more regional entities that do still communicate a lot. And it's New York State DEC that is funded by the Environmental Protection Funds, EPF, and they contract with organizations for the 8 PRISMs. So while a couple of the other PRISMs are actually run by local CCEs, the PRISM that's the Lower Hudson is led by the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. And the leader for that is Dr. Linda Rohleder, and she's been very effective and very visible, and I can't give her enough credit. I'll be talking about the partnership here as more of a concept. And what it is it's really cooperative and it's really regional. And I'll show you the partners in a minute so that you can sort of identify with seeing the variety of the partners. And some of them are scientists, some of them are landscapers, some of them are university involved, some of them are very involved in their community, but it's people that are all looking to do something proactive to counterindicate the negative effects of invasive species. And what it is it's really focused on the region, on the needs of the region, on the geography of the region. You can see here that the Catskills sort of cuts Ulster in two, because part of this is more farm and part of Ulster is more the Catskills. And so the geology is what helps form them differently than maybe the farming areas of the Finger Lakes or the lake areas here all along Ontario. The programs have a lot of different activities. Some are actually eradicating invasives, some are educational, some are monitoring, and I'll try and give a couple of those as we go through. Each year, a request for proposals is issued. It's available to anyone that wants to apply in the region. If you're a partner, you get a few more points for your application. And normally those requests for projects are asked to specifically address some of the needs of the local PRISM. This is the website. This is one of our working meetings, and I looked, and here's the storyboards that we created in the back. The meetings usually have educational content. They usually have partners sharing what they've been doing. We report on special projects. Sometimes we brainstorm. We recently had multiple virtual meetings as we worked on the strategic plan results from 2020 and plans for 2021. So it has a lot of good networking time, even though we're virtual, and you get to meet in neat places like Teatown Lake and stuff like that. The website's very good. A little bit of it is out of date, but that happens with websites. There are good resources, and do take the time if you're interested. As an example, there's a nice long 35-page paper that Eric Caveat and Hudsonia created with non-chemical methods for controlling a lot of invasive species. So really good information on there. Why aren't I not going to the next page? There we go. There is a strategic plan. We first joined the CCEs locally. We first joined, I think, in 2014 and created the first strategic plan. It often has a 2 to 3 to 5 year time frame overall, but we have activities in each year which we all sign up for, and then we all report on. And capacity building, making sure that we have a lot of representation from our communities in all the areas that we need, pointing out key areas that are pristine or are especially unusual that want to be an especial priority for conservation. An example is there is a spot of the Appalachian Trail which has a perennial invasive Cordalius, I think is its name, and it's only been found in the Carolinas and here. And we're making sure there's very proactive work to control that so that it does not spread even further into that area or by the people going through it. We have specific management goals. We have education and outreach goals, which is one of the things the CCEs are very involved with. We spend a lot of time seeing where there might be pathways of invasion. As an example, at trailheads, at boat launching stations, and there are specific activities created and executed. For example, educating at boat launches what aquatic invasives are and how to wash your boat and how to drain it before you go and how to prevent any of those spreads. And then there's a lot of information exchange, formally, informally, a Google group. Has anyone seen this? What do I do? So it's a pretty nice, strong community that is available and built. It was really interesting to get all of these on one slide, but if you look around at the different people, organizations, partners, I mean, we've got Vassar, we've got Westchester, the CCEs, Cary's involved, Black Rock, Bronx River, in Pound Ridge, there are individuals that are very involved proactively on working with the town to deal with invasives. Randall Island, I mean, it's an excellent group of professionals that are passionate about doing something good in the area of invasive species. So I wanted to go over that to let you realize that as an individual, you can utilize the resources. As a New York, New Jersey Trail Conference volunteer, there are projects that you can sign up for that include garlic mustard poles or barberry removal. You can be a partner, in which case you need to go to 3 meetings out of the year. There's 6. You need to sign up to do something and you need to report on it. It's that straightforward. You can host sessions. You can build something for your community. As I said, Pound Ridge did this. They were frustrated with the giant knotweed and they started, Japanese knotweed, and they started eradicating it, which got more people stopping and saying, what are you doing? Which finally ended up with a dumpster with the town all helping. At the end, we're raising awareness throughout the entire community, professionals, personal, individuals, to know what invasives are, what you can do about them, to accomplish removal where that's appropriate, and feed data into IMAP, which Sean is going to talk about, because that is now a robust database with good tools that is helping us know what it is we're dealing with, find hotspot areas, and act upon the information. This as an example, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ailanthus altissima. And so I just went here and said, what are the records where there's Ailanthus? And it's everywhere. It's horribly everywhere. And you'll see the concern about that because of a new pest that is attracted to Ailanthus. When you get up in the Adirondacks, not so much, which is a good thing. Cary's lead is it's on the door. We lost the puppy's lead. Okay. New York State at a state level has been very proactive on managing plants that cannot be sold, restricted, or can be sold, but with heavy warnings and cannot be introduced into areas where they could spread. They're called regulated. So that at the state level, all of the PRISMs feed into that. We agree what the statewide needs are. And I think that there is a new update on that coming up maybe next year. This was first done in 2014. So that's at a statewide level. But what each PRISM does is, depending upon where they are, we're further south. So we're seeing things that are coming from the warming, coming up the Hudson, coming across from Connecticut, from New Jersey, where that could be different than SLELO, that's concerned about the things that might be on the Great Lakes that might be water pests. So tiers are created, and depending upon how common something is, I mean, we're not going to go out and try and eradicate Phragmites. It's not going to happen. It's everywhere. So it's a tier 4. We note it. We make people aware of it. we don't plant it anymore, but nothing's really gonna be proactively accomplished with that. Tier 3, the example I can think of perhaps is kudzu. It's sort of coming up to, there's some in downtown Poughkeepsie by mistake, but it's not up further. Tier 3, Long Island has things that are unique, like southern pine beetle. Tier 2 and Tier 1 are where we can really be proactive, and where we can ask people to hunt for them and to map them, and we can do everything possible so that it's not going to come into our area, where we can manage it where it's still manageable. So a couple of examples I wanted to share include this one. I think we first started it in 2015, but it wasn't really well established until 2016. And this is a map of the Lower Hudson PRISM. And this is a map where it was cut into 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer kilometer. It was cut into sections, and every section had a number and a detailed map. And we assigned people to a map, often where they lived. I picked the one with my 1-lane road and a couple of other places. And then we took that map, and we especially went to public areas where a lot of people might be coming and going, and we mapped what we found. And this was our list. And we looked for these, and we said absence, presence, amount, etc., and got this all mapped. Now, the first year, we didn't have much information. The second year, it started growing. And as of this year, Dutchess County has almost every block mapped. Putnam has a lot. We need to do more in Orange. But what that does is it gives us more awareness and more knowledge and more input into the statewide. The first year we did this, we used paper. The first year we did this, we didn't have a whole lot of people that had GPS that could show exactly where we were. The tools are fantastic now. It's all online, and you use iMapInvasives. In 2018, and that was led by the CCEs for education, as well as each of the partners got involved. In 18, we went a little bit further. We had provided a lot of information about what was invasive, but we were starting to get gardeners and landscapers saying, okay, I can't plant euonymus, burning bush. I shouldn't plant barberry. What is it you want me to plant instead? And so I was funded for the region with the master gardeners to create an alternative. And we went through everything that had been prohibited. And we said, well, why did people plant it in the first place? What is it that made it so desirable? And then we looked and said, what could be planted instead that's just as desirable, but isn't invasive? And honestly, a lot of the difficulty was because so many of the invasives are deer proof, and a lot of our natives are not. We ended up saying we're not going to have the rule it has to be native, but most of it in fact became native. If you're ever interested, give me a call. There's an hour and a half presentation on it that we'd love to share. And what we did was we created it so that all the partners could use it. And then we made nice big boards that made the points that are waterproof, and you can bring them to a farmer's market, or you can bring them to the Putnam Fair or wherever. And it raised awareness and told people about alternatives. So this year, even though everyone was in quarantine but wanting to go outside, there were quite a few citizen science projects that were all sponsored by the PRISM. Some of the projects were funded by the PRISM, and they urged people either through iNaturalist or iMapInvasives to do a lot of mapping. Using iMap gets it to the database real time. Sometimes there's a day or two delay while experts verify the pictures. iNaturalist data is uploaded at a later time bulk. So sometimes there's a little bit of a delay, but the two data sources can be synced so that we have multiple tools collecting information that can be analyzed individually. There's lots of cool stuff with EcoQuests. I know this picture was not this year because everyone would have had masks on, but there's a lot of things like mustard garlic pulling parties. So that was the Lower Hudson PRISM, okay, good. The Lower Hudson Partnership for Invasive Species Management and some of the projects that they've sponsored that we've been involved with. This year, I was also asked to train, and I did it last year too, to train people on a couple of key invasives. And I have 20 minutes now that I can go over these. So I've got some time. This is good. We've got professionals like DEC, like DEP that are out doing their job, dealing with diseases, dealing with pests, but often they're controlling, they're managing. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to build a bunch of people with citizen science to be boots on the ground, to proactively look for four things. Tree of Heaven is already a tier 4 invasive species. I showed you that map. But spotted lanternfly is a pest I'm going to explain to you, which now is moving into our area just a little. And Tree of Heaven is the spotted lanternfly's favorite host. So those two we're teaching hand in hand. Beech leaf disease was first reported in New York in 2019, and sadly it's spreading, and I'll explain that. And I'll explain jumping worms, which the more we know, the more we learn. They probably have been here for many years, but were not widely reported. They were especially obvious 2019 and 2018. And so we got a lot of people in New York interested about them. This year was so hot and dry, there wasn't a lot of activity, but I'll tell you about them. So what we did was I ran 4 workshops and trained. We had 95 registrants. We had 50 people at a time at the different workshops. We have recordings if you're interested, but we went into in-depth, detailed training on these things, and we got people to use iMap to map what they found. I have a poll. Sean, do you have the first poll? I think it has 2 questions.
Yep. And all right, there's the first poll just launched. There are 2 questions. Make sure you scroll down to answer both of them before you answer.
And there's a sneakiness here between plants and trees, because trees are plants, but not all plants are trees. I did a tree identification walk at Locust Grove for Poughkeepsie's Big Read 2 weekends ago. That was cool. There's so many cool trees at Locust Grove. You should go there and learn your trees.
All right, just a few more trickling in.
Yeah. And those of us that are panelists can't vote, so.
All right. Couple more seconds. All right.
Okay, so you should be able to see the poll results. And I like that there's the difference, because identifying plants, you can be really good at some plants and not good at others. Let me just go on and just cut to the chase. I'm going to stop the share results. Whoops, stop. Do you have to stop it, Sean?
There we go. That should be good, right?
Okay, I made it go away. I hope it went away from yours.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so the point I want to make is trees are a lot easier to identify than plants. If you think of wildflowers, think about the books that you pick up for a wildflower. Almost all of them start from the flower. What do you do when it's not in flower? Grasses drive me crazy. You have to look at such tiny little things to figure out what grass is what grass. There are some weeds that you look at it and you say, I know that, I've seen it before. I know what the roots are that I'm going to pull out, and I cannot still remember what that weed is. Trees are easier because their twig arrangement is one of the first things you look at. It's either opposite or alternate. There's not many that have opposite, but the leaves will be opposite on the twigs will be opposite on the branches will be opposite on the limb. Most trees that we have are alternate, and that helps you sort of split what it is you're looking at. The leaf arrangement, you need a leaf, or even in winter, you can look at a leaf scar. Okay, so on the arrangement, well, I guess you need the leaf because you need to see the bud. But if you have a bud here and one leaf, that's called simple. If you have a bud here and a compound leaf, these are leaflets. And there's not very many that are doubly compound. So once again, it's almost binary. It's either simple or compound. And you can sort of split down your choices. The leaf margin, whether it's entire or serrated, and the shape. So those are things that are key. The other thing that you can look at is seeds, which tend to be persisting on the tree or on the ground. And so even after bloom, you've got seeds, and that helps you a lot with trees. Now, I thought I had one more slide in here, but here's your next question. Do you know about Ailanthus, tree of heaven, and how comfortable are you identifying tree of heaven? And I'm going to make you feel better in a minute. Oh, cool. And I will tell you that when I was helping run the blockbuster classes, Linda had a lot of the plants in pots, and my job was to walk my road with invasive species and bring in extra samples. And until I listened to Linda teach it the first year, I had a horrible time identifying tree of heaven. Now I can do it as long as there's a leaf, and I can do it almost as quickly as if I only have the tree. So people are somewhat comfortable, and I'll make you all very comfortable. Okay, next. Oops. I am going to describe American beech and tree of heaven side by side, because sometimes they're really similar and sometimes they're very different. Tree of heaven is what we're worried about with spotted lanternfly. American beech is what we're worried about with beech leaf disease. And here's how they line up side by side. They're both full sun to part shade, but American beech is usually really either in undisturbed, moist, old forest, or because they were the darling of ornamental landscapers, they're formally planted in cemeteries, at old mansions, at Roosevelt, at Vanderbilt, at Greenwood Cemetery. They're beautiful, they're stately, and they were either native or formally planted. Tree of heaven was introduced in the 1800s as an ornamental. It was on the East Coast and in the 1850s on the West Coast, and it's invasive almost everywhere, but in the cold center Rockies. It likes disturbed areas, sides of highways, it likes moisture, and it thrives in cities, okay? Both of them have smooth bark, and I'm going to show you that. Both of them have alternate branching, okay? Then they get a little bit different in terms of flowers and nuts, and so when you learn what you're looking for, it's pretty easy to see them. Both of them spread by seed and root sprouting. So in undisturbed forest, you can pretty quickly learn to find little sproutlings of small saplings of beech, because they also keep their leaves on in winter. Once you see the little ones, you can start looking through the forest and find the mother tree, okay? Ailanthus also spreads by seed and root sprouting. Now, part of the problem with Ailanthus, because it is unwanted, if we cut down Ailanthus trees, it just makes all those roots sprout. So as we're trying to figure out how to deal with ailanthus and spotted lanternfly, you do not just cut down the tree, and I'll show you a picture in a second. You can easily see the leaves of beech in winter. You can easily see the seeds of ailanthus in winter. American beech is depended upon by all sorts of our wildlife, and ailanthus feeds nothing but spotted lanternfly. So we looked at tree, twig position, we looked at leaves, we looked at seeds, we also can look at bark. And here is American beech, and here is ailanthus. A lot of trees have smooth bark when they're young. But if you see those saplings and you find the mother tree, the original tree, you will see the true bark. And you know beech, everyone carves it, right? Because I mean, it's so smooth. Ailanthus is described to be more like a cantaloupe. And when it's young and you see all of these saplings, these lenticles and that leaf scar that looks to me like one of the 7 dwarfs with a beard, that is very obvious. So even in winter, ailanthus is easy to find. This is beech. This is ailanthus. The beech leaf is it's a single leaf, and it has a little bit of a tooth to it. Okay. The ailanthus is compound, so you see all these leaflets that are going to be coming down to a bud down there. This is its flower. But the most obvious thing with Tree of Heaven is if the 6 months that it has leaves, you can look at the leaf. It's the only leaf that has that little gland there at the bottom of each leaflet. And when you smush it, it stinks. It stinks like rancid peanut butter, or like, oh, it's only one dong. The other one will do one dong. It smells like rancid peanut butter or burnt rubber. So if you've got winter, you can look at the smooth bark and the bud scar. If you've got summer, you can look at the leaves. And then this was why ailanthus was imported, because it's got beautiful seeds called samaras. It blooms in mid-June, July, and then it has these beautiful seeds. The seeds turn a beautiful orange, dark orange color in autumn. They turn light brown and they persist on the female trees in winter. So beech and ailanthus are both alternate, simple, compound, serrated. I don't know my little things down here. I can't see it because of the Zoom thing. Here's the samaras of ailanthus, and here's the beech nut. This is an example of Tree of Heaven when it's allowed to root sprout. And when your eye gets used to seeing those seeds and the side of the taconic, on the side of any road, you will see that there's going to be huge trees, or there's going to be a lot of small trees, or both. Because as highway departments come through and they cut them down, they just root sprout. So this is the ailanthus that's all over New York. And I think now I have a poll. Now, how comfortable are you identifying ailanthus? I put 90 minutes into 10, 5. Yes. Okay, all right, you can practice. I mean, I was looking at walnut trees, black walnut trees, and trying to count the leaflets, because I read something that said the number of leaflets, it makes no difference. There's no gland. I was trying to figure out sumac. It makes no difference. There's no gland. So it's pretty easy to figure out ailanthus. Thank you. I will go on now to why we care about that. Oops. Next poll. How comfortable are you identifying insects? And I will tell you, the more I learn about identifying insects, the more I know that I don't know enough about identifying insects. It's tricky, almost, and I give a whole lecture on this. It's almost easiest when you know where they are and what they're feeding on, to then figure out what it is they are. So, whoops, I went the wrong way. There we go. This is not how you identify an insect, but this is spotted lanternfly. And this is the photograph that was everywhere about spotted lanternfly. You do not identify an insect by the color of its underbody, by the color of its wings, when the insect normally has its wings folded. So everyone was walking around with pins on spotted lanternfly, and it rarely looks like this. You identify insects by their legs, by their antennae, by the shape of the antennae, by the venation on their wings. There's all sorts of ways that you identify spotted insects, but not by color. Why do we worry about spotted lanternfly? It first was found in Pennsylvania on rock. I think it was marble. I think it came in from somewhere in Europe. But as one person quips, why do we need more rock in Pennsylvania? But they came in as eggs and have been spreading since then. There was it first was very centralized here, and as they've spread, these are quarantines that are enforced by ag and markets, that any product coming out of this area has to be certified to not have any spotted lanternfly insects or eggs, or the place that receives it can reject that and send it back from whence it came. This quarantine has been getting larger and larger. It is where there are more populations spreading. And our problem here is that we do have more now that are showing up in New York. As of March, we did not have a breeding population in New York. I do believe the population found on Staten Island now is a breeding population. Why do we care? We care because they can cause a lot of damage to woody plants. It's a plant hopper. And what it does is a woody plant, think grapevines, think fruit trees, think lumber, think of the commercial effect. As trees and woody vines send nutrients up to their leaves, then through photosynthesis, this is xylem, the nutrients come back down in the phloem. What these pests do is they take the nutrients they want and they exude, they piss out the sugars that they don't need. So they're weakening the tree, they're weakening the vine by taking the nutrients, and they're causing damage because that sugary substance causes black sooty mold, which now damages the crops that were being grown for commercial reasons. Okay, they go through, I'll show you a cycle, but if you look here, this is what it looks like most of the time. And if you look up spotted lanternfly, go to New York State IPM, go to Penn State, you will see pictures of trees covered in these things. They're an inch long. You see pictures of people swatting them in downtown Philadelphia. What's remarkable is up here, this is a fused mandible, which is forming that sucking mouth part, which the older they get, the more they can pierce successfully into stronger and stronger bark and wood, and the more damage they can do. The egg masses are laid, just like with gypsy moth, on almost anything that is a hard surface, and then they're covered. And in my long presentation, we play, can you spot the eggs? They're really hard to see. And they really blend in. And they are covered, they are protected during winter. And if they're on something that travels, those eggs can travel a long way. This is the life cycle. The eggs go through the winter and start hatching in spring. This is a plant hopper, so it has an external skeleton that it goes through a couple of stages called instars. As it gets bigger, it gets bigger. And its first three instars are black with white spots. Then its fourth is red, and you can start seeing the bud or the wing buds that are being created. And then the adults that will breed can emerge from July until hard frost. And they can lay eggs all autumn long. So when we were teaching citizen scientists, we were asking them to hunt for ailanthus, then look for these bugs, these insects. They're very sociable. They tend to congregate more and more as they get older. So knowing what you're looking for and when, we taught other lookalikes, but they are on woody plants, they do swarm, and they do have that sooty mold. They can move themselves, but they're not very good flyers. They're really good hitchhikers though. And they can go on trucks and trains and cars and campers and barbecues. And the problem is that when you see where all those ailanthus were on all of our highways, the spotted lanternfly can be being moved by people. So how well do you think you could spot spotted lanternfly? That's a poll, Sean. Yeah, we can skip that poll if we're having technical difficulties on that one. I'll go on. We have help, and this is just a small little sidetrack. We have help. There are conservation dogs that Lower Hudson PRISM staff, there's 2 staff, Josh and Adrian, I have forgotten her name. And they have, this is Josh with Dia, and he was used when spotted lanternfly was found on a ocean-going ship that had come from Philadelphia up to New York. And they found spotted lanternfly, and Dia and Josh helped work the whole ship to make sure that there weren't any more. There's also Fagin, and they are taught as scent dogs. I think he's a Malinois, and they can find perennial plants, they can find grasses, they can find lanternfly, and they've just been trained on oak wilt, which is a fungus. Just to show off, Fagin found this dead adult in an 18-wheeler grill, and Dia found this egg case underneath a railroad track. Check it out, it's way cool. Really important for us to find. A couple minutes ago, I'm not going to make you poll because I'm looking at time. Beach. I showed you what beach looked like. We have something that it's still not even totally confirmed what's causing it. It's seemingly lethal. It's spreading in a way that can't just be climate change. We can't find insects. We think it's nematodes that are spreading it. And scientists are working really hard to figure that out, to figure out how it could be controlled. It's only been known for 8 years. It destroys the leaves and then the buds. And when it destroys the buds, the tree can't bud out next year, or it buds out on auxiliary buds. It weakens the trees. And we can have saplings die within 2 to 5 years, and those huge, huge trees die within 6 years. It's of special concern, and it is moving. These are the symptoms. There's a dark greening and then a leathery appearance in between the veins of the leaves. The original people found it in Ohio. They were walking in a beech grove and they thought, this canopy looks thin. And the more they looked, the more damage they saw. As it progresses, they get brown, they fall off. And as I said, it affects the buds. And so the tree can be killed because it can't leaf out, or it's working so hard to leaf out that it can really weaken it. This is how quickly it has spread. It was here on the light blue. Where's my cursor? There it is. There's my cursor. So this was 2012. This is where we are a couple of years later. This is now where it's jumped across Lake Ontario, Lake Erie. And unfortunately, last year it jumped to Long Island and to some parts of Westchester. And this year it's been found in Connecticut, it's been found in Rockland and more parts of Westchester. So it's killing our native, it can kill our native beech, and it can also affect other beech. This again is the symptoms, and that is a thinning canopy. Beech have a lot of other problems, so you need to make sure you know what you're looking at, but take photos and report it because there are some mites and other things. But again, this is what you see when you look up on the canopy. This is a shadow, but this is the problem you see. So understanding how to look at Ailanthus, understanding how to look for beech, then knowing where they are, watching for thinning canopies and wilted leaves, and reporting it through iMap or iNaturalist, and then experts can also deal with that. I would like you to launch, Sean, the last poll on beech leaf disease. I'm going to very briefly go into jumping worms, but I'm going to ask you to read about that yourself, because I don't have the time to do it justice. Good.
You have a few minutes if you need.
Okay. All right. Well, I will try and do just a jumping worms succinctly.
Okay.
I'm just going to turn that off on mine.
Just a few more polls coming in.
And I'll let you tell me when you're going to share that.
Thanks.
So we as gardeners have been taught that worms are good. And we know that they're good because we've been taught that they're good. And we know that they're good because Darwin was the one that told us all that they were good. Excellent. I'm glad. Anyone that wants to learn more, contact me and I'll give you more information with beech leaf disease. Thank you. So Darwin wrote a treatise in the 1880s that explained European, whoops, I'm going the wrong direction. And what he was describing was the European earthworm. Most native worms were killed in the Northeast by glacial activity. So the European earthworms were probably brought either deliberately or on plant material from with the colonists that came from Europe. And we know a lot about how worms are good. The European earthworms have a nice, long, deep tunnel. They come up occasionally, only when it's cool. Most of the time they're deep. They do good things for roots. They do good things for soil. There are also some endogeeic, which are more in the surface, which aren't bad. There are some which are epigeic, which are in the top portion of the soil, and jumping worms are those. And they are huge, and they severely disrupt the top couple of inches of the soil, which is bad for forests, which is bad for saplings and seedlings, and is causing a lot of concern. They look a lot alike. It's where they live, if they're in the top or deep. Jumping worms are shiny, night crawlers are slimy. There's a couple of other things that you can figure out looking carefully. The most critical is that European night crawlers only have a couple little hairs on their segment, so they go like a worm, where the jumping worms have that hair all the way around and they can actually jump. If you Google crazy jumping worms, you'll see some way cool videos. They are active throughout late summer. This is an example of one next to a pen. You can see it's huge. It's of concern to forests, to turf, and what they do when they consume all the carbon in those top couple of inches, they leave castings which are highly erodible, a really high pH. By the way, they don't need to mate. They are parthenogenetic. Their cocoons survive to our cold winters, even though the worms are killed by our winter. They're spread by people. These are some examples of the cocoons when they're fresh and the cocoons when they're more aged, but people that move soil or get contaminated compost or don't clean their boots or share plants is what's spreading these. Also, it might be because of baits. So there's a lot of work figuring out where they are. There's not any control for them now. And we're doing a lot of work on monitoring and mapping them. So I did this citizen science project as an example of us being a partner of Lower Hudson PRISM, where we taught about spotted lanternfly, beech leaf disease, jumping worms, and now Sean is going to tell you more about iMapInvasives after I gave you the overview, the opportunities, and the projects. Okay, I was 4 minutes over.
No, that's great, Joyce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
So I'll transition over to me, and I do have a just to kick it off. But if anyone has a couple, a question or two for Joyce before I get going here,
and I can answer chats too.
Yeah, absolutely. But feel free to put them in the chat there or the Q&A function, either or, and they get answered for you. And while I'm waiting on that,
It looks like we have an attendee with their hand raised. So I can allow, it's Robert, I can allow him to talk?
Sure,
Yep.
go for that.
All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Any questions? Residents have assurance that those questions will be fully addressed by the investigation. This afternoon, the lawyer who owns the stand.
Robert, you are unmuted so you can ask your question.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I've seen it written actually by a Columbia conservancy expert that the Ailanthus is allelopathic. I'm not know if I have that name right, that word right. But that means that the Ailanthus has some kind of toxin that kills or retards other plants.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And so that's why it not only spreads very quickly, but it's suppressing other growth around it. Allelopathic, I don't have it right either. I know what you mean. But yes,
Okay.
it
Could
adds
you
a chemical.
could you comment a little bit about the nature of that? Does it retard or kill most all things or just certain species?
Usually that characteristic is generally all species. And if you looked at a good established stand of Ailanthus, you would probably find very little undergrowth.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Robert now. All right, so it looks like we got a nice mix. Thank you for those who filled out the poll. Just curious about the audience in the quote unquote room tonight, and got some Master Gardener volunteers, some CAC members, interested residents. Great. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to transition into talking about, so Joyce gave a great overview of the partnerships and a lot of kind of the projects going on in the region. And she mentioned iMapInvasives to a degree. So I'm just curious if people are familiar with iMapInvasives. It's a web mapping tool for reporting a lot of these things. So I'm just curious if people are using this, how familiar they might be with that. So just take a second and fill out that poll for me. All right, so it looks like a few people have used it once or twice, and one there on a regular basis, and a lot of you who this is new for, so that's great. Love teaching new people this material. So with that, I will share my screen. Great. Again, my name is Sean Carroll. Just a little bit of background about myself. I'm part of the environment and energy team, as I mentioned, but I do also coordinate our GIS lab at the Farm and Home Center in Millbrook. I'll give a little bit of an overview on that towards the end of my spiel here, but my background is in geographic information systems and mapping. So I'm going to give you an overview on iMapInvasives, the tool, how to use both the web-based tool as well as the mobile application. So again, I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of that. I'll try not to get too bogged down in the technical part of getting started and creating accounts. There are a ton of great resources on both the general iMapInvasive site as well as the New York IMAP. So if this is going too fast for you, I'd highly recommend checking out some of those resources, and I'd be happy to point you in that direction as we go along. We'll get into a little bit of using the map and viewing records, the mobile application itself and how to use that, creating new projects if you're interested in working with your communities or municipalities on getting involved in this and creating new projects. And then lastly, and I'd say most importantly, how to download data from iMap and how to use this. So again, Joyce gave a pretty good overview of what iMapInvasives is, but just to highlight it, it really is an excellent tool, and the main goals are for management and sharing of invasive species information. It's a great collaborative tool and platform for aggregating this information. and it organizes it in a way that allows you to share, to analyze, and to use for actual management and treatment of invasive species. So I mentioned, there's kind of two components to iMapInvasives. The collection of data component, which is usually done via your mobile application on your smart device, whether it's your phone or a tablet. And then there's the web-based component as well, which is usually viewed through a desktop, although you can get to that information from your device as well. And they store all their data on Amazon Cloud. So again, here's just kind of showing the concept, right? So it starts out as a reporting tool, which can be used for tracking efforts. You can use the map for viewing species distribution and getting reports. And then also, the end goal here is early detection of potential new invasives. So as you're getting started with this, there is a lot of capacity for just the individual to record information on iMap, but kind of the beauty of it and the real strength of it is in these what are called organizations. As Joyce mentioned, the Lower Hudson PRISM is a great organization that focuses on the Hudson Valley region, the Lower Hudson Valley region, which most of you are located in. It would probably be the best place to start if you're interested in joining an organization and getting involved in this. And then projects, projects are kind of, think of them as like a kind of a subfolder from an organization. Projects can, within an organization, they could have several projects that are related to different tracking. If you're interested in a project for a specific invasive species in your community, you can create a new project for that. Again, the goal here is allowing individuals or organizations to easily organize and view these records and have them well organized for scientific and data purposes. So again, kind of just getting into basic account, which is just a simple user, versus more advanced accounts and organizational admin accounts. Just kind of highlighting the benefits of being part of an organization here. There's a lot more functionality as you get into an organization, allowing for more detailed reporting, more detailed information and data gathering. So as we mentioned, New York State has a great program already established as part of iMapInvasives. New York is considered one of the participating jurisdictions, along with several other states and a province or two in Canada. And it was launched in New York in 2010 as the state's invasive species database, and is today managed by the New York Natural Heritage Program with funding from the Environmental Protection Fund. So the best way to get started would be to visit the New York iMapInvasives site. Both the New York site and the general iMapInvasives site, you can log in to, you have an account that's kind of shared by the two. The New York specific one is just kind of a nice data portal for New York data. And to get to that, you can visit newyorkimapinvasives.org. So getting started, for those who haven't already used iMapInvasives, the best way to go about doing that would be to visit that URL. Create an account and then sign in, log in, create an account here via the page that pops up. I would just mention down here under jurisdiction, you'd want to select New York from that, especially if most of you are working in New York State exclusively or for the most part. So just be sure to select the proper jurisdiction there as you sign up. So for the first time, when you log in here to the map page, it'll give you this nice little diagram showing you where some of the toolbars are, giving you some information, a little user guide, which is pretty helpful. And then it'll probably give you this little pop-up just letting you know, iMapInvasives wasn't updated last year. And actually, it looks like there's a more recent update just recently in September. So So that's great. They're constantly updating this with new information and making it more user friendly. So once you get to the landing page here, the map, first thing you might want to check out is just your invasives, your iMapInvasives account. Over here in this left toolbar, you'll see this little menu item here. And with that, you got several options. This is kind of your personal account menu here. And if you click on your account, you want to just make sure everything is in order here. You know your username, your actual personal information here. You know, feel free to put job, title, and profession in there. And then it's also where you'll find what projects and organizations you might be part of. So I'll discuss a little bit about how to join those if you're interested in becoming part of one of those organizations. So to do that, again, in that kind of drop-down menu on the top left where you find your account, there's organizations. You click that and you'll have a whole list of organizations by jurisdiction. Again, we want to choose New York. We get a whole list of New York organizations, and then we can search for a specific one. Here I just typed in Lower Hudson and find the Lower Hudson PRISM active, and I can request to join it through there. And that'll go to the administrator at that organization, and they'll accept your request. So using the map itself, it's pretty straightforward for anyone who's used, Google Maps or really any kind of map viewer. You have several toolbars, the navigation toolbar here, which allows you to zoom in and out to go to your specific location or to find a specific address. You have this action toolbar up top, which I'll break apart in a little bit here. This is used for finding and creating records. And then you have the layer info and legend all the way to the right. This is where you'll find the information about what all the symbology on the map means, and you'll be able to toggle layers on and off. So a great tool or a great component of this, both the web map tool and the mobile device, is when you're recording something and you want to instantly find your location, you can use this little target sign down here, and that'll bring you, you have to allow the application to know your location. And that'll bring you to the specific spot where you're located, or you can search for an address on the toolbar. You can use that little magnifying glass, and that'll give you the option to type in a specific address if you're located somewhere else and want to drill down more closely there. So for here, just for an example, I drilled down to the Farm and Home Center in Millbrook, where our offices are located. And that's just a quick and easy way to get there. The last thing I'll just show with this is sometimes you might want to change your base map. Here we have a topographic map as a base map, but we might want to, in some instances, see satellite imagery. So we can use this change base maps tool to get down to that. All right, so getting into kind of the meat and potatoes of it, we're interested in seeing some records. So how do you find records for your local town, your local municipality, for your property, or anything in the nearby area? The way to do that is to use the action toolbar up here on the top. You can select either find record or filter records, and those are two options to get into it. Find record you would use if you had a specific record ID, you knew that a colleague of yours or volunteer had collected a specific record ID that you needed to get into, and you can search by that. And usually this is probably more likely the case, you can filter records, and you can do that by specific species name. So if you're interested, Joyce had demonstrated how she filtered the map for Ilanthus specifically. That's one way to go about doing that. You can filter your records by species name and by certain dates as well. So here, for example, I filtered this down by Japanese barberry. This is an invasive plant that many of us are familiar with, and it's pretty widespread throughout the Northeast. But we can see that the map did whittle down a little bit to these hexagons showing densities of the plant. but that's not always useful at that coarse scale. So we can zoom in further to the county level. Here we're looking at Dutchess County. And then I can zoom in even further, and then those hexagons disappear, and we get actual point files here showing specific locations of where people had reported that invasive species. Another interesting tool and useful tool is the Identify Measure tool. Here I zoomed into a spot in the Vanderbilt Mansion National Historic Site. Again, these are Japanese barberry records, and I wanted to get a sense of what area they were covering, and then I also wanted to have a record of all of those points. So I used the Identify Measure tool and selected the area, drew the polygon here on the map, and got an area measurement. And if I click see what's here, that opens up an attribute table where I can actually see every single point that falls within that polygon that I drew. I can see, when it was collected, observed, by whom, what organization that falls within. And then if I click details, I can get some even more information, all the information that was recorded for that point. So on to creating records. This is what you'll do as you're using this application and you want to start marking points and getting them entered into the database. Up here in this action toolbar again, there's the create record icon button. And when you create a record in iMapInvasives, you'll get two options. You'll have the option to either to record a presence of a specific species of concern, or you can, if you searched an area as part of a project and you didn't detect it, you could also record that as well. Both records are useful. So creating a presence record. Oh yeah.
Sorry, Sean. It looks like we have a question.
Great.
From Grace, so I'm gonna allow her to ask that.
Sure.
All right, Grace. I'll unmute you.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to tap.
Oh, you didn't mean to? Okay. All right then.
No worries.
Keep going, Sean.
Okay, great. No worries. So for creating presence records, we choose that option in the menu there. It defaults the point, but we can also draw a line or a polygon. Oh, I lost my. There we go. So with the search area set to point, I choose that, and I want to give some information on what type of point that is that I'm going to plot on the map. In this specific example, I want to record garlic mustard that I found in my backyard. So I chose that from the present species options, and just want to note you can add multiple species. So if at one survey point you found garlic mustard, Japanese barberry, and multiflora rose, you can choose all three or as many of those as you want. I'll record the date here. Then there's some more information to enter. This is optional, but the more information you can enter, the better. Evaluation type, this is monitoring, but it's untreated. I just discovered it. Follow-up, in this case, it might not be appropriate because it's just a new discovery that I found. The phenology is vegetative, so that just means what type of what parts of the plant did I discover. And then lastly, was it an intentional planting? No, it was not. So I just checked that off. There's the summary. I just have to hit complete. And there's my summary saying your record has been saved. And it gives me my presence record, which I can then use to check out later on. And that'll be, added to the database. It'll have to be approved by one of the admins that Joyce mentioned, but it's in the database now. And I can view that by selecting that presence number. If I just want to go back in and make sure everything's right, up here in the top right, just important point out, I do have the ability to delete or edit that if I somehow made a mistake or want to make a change. And right here's just some more of the information from that presence ID. So I mentioned, the two options, recording a presence of something, but also important is being able to record the absence of a specific plant. As I mentioned, if you're out surveying an area and you didn't discover it in that area, that's also important to know. So in this case, a lot of times, again, if you're doing this in a survey for an area, it defaults to a polygon because a lot of times you're searching a specific area, not just one point. But again, you can change it to a line or to a point. So for this instance, just for an example, I used again our spotted lanternfly that Joyce just taught us so much about. This is a hypothetical situation, but we do know that it's not, knock on wood, not present here on the Farm and Home Center yet. So I drew the polygon for the property here, not detected species, spotted lanternfly, filled out all this information similar to the presence record. Reason for not detecting. This is kind of a difference here from the presence. You have several options. In this case, species has just not ever been detected here previously, which is a good thing. So again, just kind of going over the data types as a summary here. Searched area, this is the polygon where you might have looked for something. Presence, this can be a point or a polygon. If you did discover something that you were either looking for or having to stumble upon, those are records you can upload to IMAP. Not detected, which I just discussed. And then one last option, which I'm not going to get into today because it's a little more advanced, but if the organization is doing some treatments on a specific invasive plant or species in that area, that can also be recorded in the iMapInvasives, which is another great function. So I mentioned, the fact that we have the desktop software, which I just went through. The mobile application, which you would download through either Google Play or the App Store, is where the tool you would use for actually going out in the field and recording these in the field. So these are just some screenshots I grabbed from my phone, doing this as an exercise earlier this week. Again, you download it to your mobile app. You'd set up, again, your account, just as I mentioned, with making sure your preferences are all in line. And then when you go to record a specific presence or absence of something, it's the same thing, just a little different menu. You can use your phone to either take a photo there at the moment, or if it's a photo that you took earlier and you're doing this back at home, you can select the photo from your library. Again, whether it's a species you detected or not detected, the date. If you have your GPS turned on your phone, your location, it'll focus down into that specific location, or you can manually put the pin on where you are. And then you have the option to enter how much time you spent searching, which can be useful for reporting. The size of the area containing the invasive and the distribution. So here it was in my backyard, which was in a pretty good amount of my backyard. So I'm saying up to 1/2 acre. The distribution was pretty dense, so I entered that and just wrote some comments in here. It's my backyard. Then when you're ready to upload it to iMapInvasives, you check here, you select the entry you want to upload. In the menu up here in the top left, you have the upload selection option. You click that. It'll just ask you one more time if you're sure. You'll say yes, and then it'll let you know you uploaded it. So again, similar to how you created a record in the actual map on the desktop, this is the same thing, just through your smartphone.
And if I can add, Sean, this new, that new interface, it's so much improved over the previous release. It's faster, it's intuitive, it's not using data when you're out there. You can upload when you get back home. It's people that tried to use it before this release wanted it to be good, and now it's a really good mobile app. So if you tried it before, try it again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I had nothing but, this is the first time I had really used it on my phone, and it was super smooth and seamless. So they've done a great job with it. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was, using this data, getting your community involved in projects. So, if you're a CAC out there, or you're just an interested resident that wants to get more involved in this, again, first of all, I recommend, getting in touch with Joyce, and she'll steer you in the right direction in the first place, for, with regards to the Lower Hudson PRISMs. But if you're interested, once you get involved in that and kind of creating your own project specific for your community, that's definitely a great way to go. And it's a really good project for, for your town CAC, or if you have a good volunteer crew. So to do that, again, I'll just touch real quickly on this, creating new projects. Again, in this menu you have here on the left, you see the projects tab. And here you'll see kind of all of the different projects that are being done here, and I have New York jurisdiction selected. And then up here in the top right, you have the option to create a new project. And this is where you would get into that. You just fill out some information on what the project would be, maybe a short description. If you want to be associated with an organization, or if you just want it to be a project for your own personal use, both are fine. And then you can fill out some information that might be useful for yourself, start date just for your recording, if you're trying to keep track of some expenditures, or anything else. All right. So the last thing I wanted to touch base on was how to use this data. So we have this great database available to us all, and how do we get the data from it that might be of interest to us? Whether it's municipal officials, whether we're using some of this for reporting for a specific project, or scientific community uses this as well too. So there's two real different ways of how to go about getting this data. The main thing I'd point out here is this action toolbar again at the top. If you're logged in, you have this export report tab here button that you can click. And doing so will give you two different options. You can either export the data, and that'll come out as either a CSV, or if you are using a more formal GIS, you can export the data as a geodatabase or shapefile. That's one option. Or you can choose to just generate a report, which would show up in your web browser there, with some information. So I'll just get into both of those options real quick here. So for the data export option, you choose again which type of file you'd like to export it as. A CSV file, which is basically an Excel file, a spreadsheet that has different columns with data. So for this instance, we'll go with that. If you choose CSV, and then what you want to do is if you're interested in getting data for a specific boundary area, so say you were interested in just Dutchess County data or data for a specific municipality, you can select that. To do that, you would just say use the existing geography here. Here we're going to look at Dutchess County, so I chose County District. I clicked on the map for Dutchess County, which drew that, and then that's my now selected boundary. I'll say next. And then lastly, I'll export records. And that'll give me this big CSV file that has all the information that I might need, your XY coordinates, the identification information for that species, the observer, and some other great information that can be really useful. The second option is creating a report. So for this, you have a couple of different options for what type of report you might want to generate. In this case, I want to look at an infested area. So I choose that, and then I have this. I get this option up here to review report in a new tab, and that'll just open up in my web browser. A lot of the same information, but laid out a little differently, and maybe a little more user friendly. here I hadn't whittled it down to any specific species. I just wanted to see in Dutchess County what, any reported invasive species that is in the species list, and it gives me total area presence in square kilometers, total number of present points, and a total estimated area for all geometries. So again, just some great information. This is a very broad report, but I can really narrow it down if I'm looking for a specific species, and I can get some great information that way. So I'll just end on a municipal case study. This is a county in Pennsylvania, Bucks County. This is a municipality that used iMapInvasives for a specific project in their community. In this case, a 50-acre lake that is used for boating and fishing, but has a serious water chestnut issue. We're dealing with that in a number of our water bodies, especially the Hudson River here. In this case, 30 to 40% of the lake was infested with water chestnut. So, pretty vigorous spread. So in this case, Bucks County used iMapInvasives first to mark observation records. So, these point records here showing where on the lake they initially located water chestnut. And then later on, as they decided to treat it, they were able to use iMap to draw polygons of where specific treatments were done year by year. So in this case, it was used as a great tool for kind of monitoring both the work that they've done as well as the spread and the results of their treatment. So that was kind of my overview of iMapInvasives. I know that was a whirlwind in a half hour there, but I just want to encourage anyone who might be interested in using it or getting more involved with mapping of invasives. I just want to, again, give a plug for the GIS lab that I coordinate here at the Farm and Home Center. We have access to all the GIS data that you might need. We have the ability to do custom mapping analysis, large format printing. We have an excellent data, access to a great amount of data for both local, state, and federal information, and have the expertise to help out with that. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Joyce, about PRISMs and the partnerships in the region, and to myself if you are interested in more of the technical side of things and how to get involved in that. Great. So the last thing I just want to remind you all, we'll put we have a quick evaluation if you don't mind filling out. Again, I'll send that via email, but if you could all please just take a minute or two to fill that out, that really helps us as well. So with that, I'll wrap up the evening, and I would just thank you all again. If anyone has specific questions for either Joyce or myself, we'll stick around for a little while, and feel free to enter those into the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll get those taken care of for you.
There were questions, Sean, as you were speaking, and Michelle and I were sharing. There are lots of good tutorials on iMapInvasives and iNaturalist. iNaturalist, colleague Brent just made a bunch of them for the Lower Hudson PRISM. I think iNaturalist is used a little bit more with people, with peers sharing, like I said, but it is uploaded into iMaps. So both of them can be really fun tools and can be good projects to share with friends or communities or whatever.
Yeah. There's if you go to just the general iMapInvasives website, which we can put here in the chat box, they have a ton of tutorials, user's guide, manual, and a lot of there is even a lot of more functionality in the tool that I didn't get into, just a little more advanced. So it's a really slick tool. It's got a lot of great functionality, and it's really helping out. Again, this is all citizen science collected data, but the scientific community really relies on it, and it's very useful.
And one of the things we're doing with Seek and iNaturalist is getting kids involved. So there's a couple of the 4-H clubs that are also starting to learn about nature and reporting it and identifying, which I think is way cool too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you, Joyce, for a great presentation. We'll stick around for another minute or two here if anyone's lingering and has a few questions. Looks like we got a question from Ina. Joyce, do you want to address that?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I sit in the prisms, my job is to think about education, but I listen to a lot of municipalities, and yes, they share how to manage these when they're managed. I mean, some of the places, some of the places down on the parkways are such a mess with vines and trees. They do get managed because those vines can kill the trees, which can come down on the road. I learned that the biggest pest right now is porcelain berry. It looks a lot like Oriental bittersweet, but porcelain berry is becoming quite a problem to the south of us on the parkways. So I do think that there's sharing of knowledge and also sharing of management and control. Certainly DOT and professionals have a lot more tools in terms of being able to use chemicals, et cetera, because they're licensed to do that.
And it looks like we have a couple comments that some attendees, it's getting them thinking about projects to start. So that's exciting.
Great.
With Ailanthus as an example, I had an hour in Poughkeepsie one day between two meetings, and I thought, okay, I'll see what I can do to map it. It happened to be a contest from DEC. And I went to Marist College campus, which is pristine until you go down to the boathouse. And I went on the culinary, which is gorgeous until you get behind the dorms. And Ailanthus is all up and down the railroad because it's disturbed, because it's junky soil. And so there are places where we could say, oh, we don't have any problem here, but you go just around behind the building and there's still a lot of problems. So even if you got a small community involved in understanding where to look and how to look, because there's the need to scout for a new pest, that I think has been a good approach to get people involved in needing to learn to do something with it.
So we have a question, let's see, from Ellen. I see tree of heaven all along the roads in my neighborhood. What to do?
Very, very briefly, the way that Penn State has the best description on how to eliminate tree of heaven. And basically it would be something that probably professionals would do, but you wait until autumn when the trees are bringing more nutrition down than they are pushing up, when they're going through sinensis and abscission. And that is where you damage the bark and you use a systemic herbicide that it's bringing it down into the roots. So it's killing the tree by its roots instead of chopping off the tree and urging those roots to sprout new saplings.
Okay. I've got a question from Rolf. Okay, Rolf. So the filter, yes or no. So as I was going through that in the map, that was just if I wanted to filter all the data points that I got in my search by a specific species or a specific date period or a specific organization or user, et cetera. I can choose to filter by any number of those different attributes. And when I went to export that data, I can have the export either include that filter, which would just give me the fewer results that I'm looking for, or I can choose no, and that would give me a much larger number of results that isn't filtered. So hopefully that answers your question.
And my puppy didn't bark.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much. We did record this webinar. We'll be sure to share it around with the registrants again, and we'll probably put it up on our CCEDC.org website. So it will be available to share if you want to pass that on to anyone else. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
And yeah, thanks, Joyce. And hope everyone has a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.